Okay, so welcome to the Emek Learning Centre in 64 Rehov, Emek Rafaim here in Jerusalem. And as you can see from the title of this shiur today, The War Against the Jews, 2023. And of course, it was a famous book in the 70s called The War Against the Jews. So I thought it would be, as we are still in a war in Gaza, and the theme is identical, let's explore that a little bit today. Make sense? Okay. I want you to imagine the world and what it would look like if there were no Jews. What would the world be like if there were no Jews? I mean, the aspiration of the Nazis, the aspiration of Hamas and Iran and all the Islamists and all their lunatic supporters, all those Nazi sympathizers in the UK and across Europe. What would the world be like if there was no Jews? How would you picture that?
Nobody who said yes to the giving of the Torah.
Oh, so obviously a religious answer here. No, but there would be nobody to say. Right? That's a superb answer. Surely it doesn't say in the Torah, it doesn't say in the Haggadah, that if it wasn't for the fact that the Jewish people accept the Torah, there would be no world. It doesn't quite say that, but I'm going to come back to that because it's such a really good question. Okay, what else or any other ideas? What would the world look like if there was no Jews? Well, for a start, and you all know this figure, how many Jews are there in the world? It is 0.2% of the world's population are Jews. How many of the Nobel Prize winners were Jews? 22%. 22%. So almost a quarter of the world's Nobel Prizes were garnered by a people who are 0.2.
They will even show up in the Chinese statistics because we are so small.
Yes, we're totally insignificant. But what we do and what we've given and what we give is massively significant. So for a start, what would the world be like without the Jews? A tinier world. You see, because the world was running out of food as the population really started to explode in the 20th century. And it was a Jew who discovered that if you use nitrates on soil and plants, you can up the yield by a factor of 6 or 8. I can't remember what it is. So that means to say...
What's his name?
What? Yeah, oh, don't do that to me. Yes, I've written about... I have written... Yes, he's actually a very controversial figure because he was a German Jew, completely assimilated. Very, very famous chemist. So was his wife, who blew her brains out because of his work during the First World War. It was him who invented poison gas.
Oh, that was it Haber?
That's right, Haber. Fritz Haber. Fritz Haber. And of course this is horrific. The Germans loved this.
That's
and
why
there was
blew her brains out.
yes,
That.
yes. Well, I assume so. From all the accounts I've read of him, he wasn't such a nice fellow. Totally assimilated Jew, terribly proud to be German. And he actually got himself commissioned in the German army. He wasn't just good enough to come up with these ideas, but he actually went and deployed them on the battlefields. He was there doing this stuff. So everybody was appalled when the Germans deployed chemical weapons, poison gas. But they weren't appalled enough that they didn't do it as well. It's just that Germany and Haber was the first person to do it. After the war, though, despite the fact, I say it's a bit of a... If the British said, that's it, we are not going to do such things, then you can get on your high horse. But if the British and the Americans and all the rest said, get a move on, we want to do that as well, we need to do that as well. So it rather, you can't really point the finger of blame at Germany for doing it. You're just annoyed that they did it first. Okay? But he also was the guy who came up with the idea of nitrates to give you incredibly increased yields. And the consequence of that, there are 6 times as many people on the planet today being fed than there would be if it wasn't for him. So if there were no Jews, first of all, there would be a heck of a lot less human beings on the planet. Oh, and the ones who are there might all be, either dead or hobbling about because they get polio. Because there's a guy called Salt who found the formula. Salk, yes, not Salk. Salk, who managed to come up with an injection against polio. And then there was another Jew, his name's going out of my mind as well, who and this is ironic, what was his name? I can't remember, who found an antidote for bubonic plague. And so devoted was he, mine's gone blank.
And
Yeah.
who developed what we call in the West anti-baby pill.
Anti-what?
Baby pill.
What? Yeah, go on.
Yeah, women can take a pill and they don't get pregnant.
Oh, yeah. Was that Jew as well?
It was Girasi.
Oh, wow, okay.
Called Girasi.
Interesting. Well, this fellow also, I think he was so determined to do this that he experimented on himself. So he injected himself with his new wonderful formula, and it worked. And the British brought him.
But he died, right?
Oh, no. The British brought him to India, which they controlled at the time. It was a massive bubonic Black Death had broken out. And of course, he saved millions and millions of lives. Now, I was lecturing in South Africa a number of years ago with my wife, and she became very friendly with Bob Dylan's daughter. And Bob Dylan got a Nobel Prize as well for poetry. I don't really think, I've got nothing particularly against poetry, but I don't think it should get a Nobel Prize, not compared to curing the world's diseases. So I'll take him out of the statistic, but we're still up there, roughly a quarter of humanity. The world will be a very, very poorer place without Jews. There'll be a lot more death and a lot fewer human beings on the planet. But of course, the good news is you never have to worry about that, because God has given it a promise that could and would never happen. Or did he?
What would that
Or did he? Now we come to Michael's point here. Let me just look at my notes here. Busy scribbling before. Now this is good. This is literally going to surprise you. That's an understatement. This is a collection. This is Haggadah, and it's a collection of many, many great commentators from all sorts of areas of Jewish tradition. But this one is one of my favourite Hasidic commentators, called the Shem Mishul. And the Shem Mishul says, how can I say? Remember in Haggadah, if we hadn't gone out, then us and our children, etc., would be slaves to Paro Mitzrayim. No, we wouldn't, because if we didn't come to Mount Sinai and accept the Torah, then the world just would go back to Tohu and Vohu. Tohu and Vohu. Now, the world was Tohu and Vohu before God creates it, and then it goes back to Tohu and Vohu. How would you translate the words Tohu and Vohu? How do you picture that?
Chaos.
The usual translation is chaos. It actually means nothingness. And that's wrong. That's the wrong translation, says this famous writer here. So I shall read a little bit Hebrew just to hold the book up here.
You can do it.
Yeah, I can check into it. Harry Balosha Kaddish Baruch Hatzias, it's Shrine Law, here's the Kabbalah Satorah. Hold on a minute. If the Jewish people hadn't been out from Egypt, there would have been no Kabbalah Satorah. The world would have been back to Toiho Vovahu. As the rabbis say, and he brings many sources for that. And then he says an astonishing thing. It's an intellectual thought which is very, very profound. If it's talking about a state, it's a state that existed. Nothing doesn't exist. Nothing is nothing. But if the world's going back to a place of Tohu Vavohu, that means the world was Tohu Vavohu. And he says what the world was a place without Jews. The world can exist without Jews. It did exist without Jews. So our whole talk is the current war on the Jews. The book that I took the title from, as they published in the 1970s, was about the Second World War on the Jews, the war against the Jews.
Who wrote it?
I hate you. You keep asking me questions. Actually, hold on. Did you look at your email?
I just saw an email just...
Well, there is a picture of the cover of the book there, and the name of the authoress is on it. You can look up after. Don't worry.
Lucy?
No, it was a lady, and I can't remember her name. Anyway, so Michael is going to enlighten us any second. It's in the email. Did you get the email?
Oh, there's no picture. I got an email at 11:16.
Yeah, there's two emails you got. One that's saying, I'm not zooming this because the quality of the zoom is not good enough for me to be able to use
I
it.
didn't get that one.
Okay, don't worry. She did exist. I'll tell you afterwards. As soon as I stop using my phone as a camera, I'll be able to quickly solve the problem for you. Okay. Fine. So basically, there is a concept of the world existing without the Jewish people. Now, this week's parsha is the parsha of Matos, as we know. And in the parsha of Matos, it says the following thing. It says, God says to Moshe, go and fight a war of revenge on the Midianites. Now, we're just talking about Pinchas, and you remember the whole story of Pinchas, that basically the Moabites and the Midianites in alliance are trying to destroy the Jewish people. They get a guy called Balaam who fails miserably, but he tells them how to do it. And he says, the relationship the Jews have with God is predicated on certain key ideas and key conditions. And one of the things he hates is sexual immorality. A sexually corrupt society like Babylon. Their God doesn't like that stuff. So get them to do that, and they're going to be in trouble. Which, of course, is what happens. So the Moabite woman, they seduce the ordinary people. I think we mentioned that last week. The Midianite people, they seduced the people who are referred to as Israel. So the Torah says the Moabite, they seduced the Am people, but it usually means like Am Ha'oretz, people who didn't know very much, ordinary, sort of working class, no great brain type guys. But the Midianites, they went for the elite of the Jewish people, and the elite means the good guys, and they corrupted them. So it's interesting, there's a war against two nations. Of course, Moab, we didn't lay a finger on. We were not allowed to lay a finger on Moab because Ruth was going to come from her in the future. When it comes to Midian, then you have to go and fight a war.
Moshe married a Moabite,
no? No, he married a Midianite, I think. I'm not terribly sure, actually. But no. Cushite doesn't. There's a debate about whether it was just talking about her appearance as opposed to her passport, assuming they had passports in those days. Okay, so basically, the war against Midian, he says, go and wage a war of revenge on behalf of God against the Midianite people, right? And that's not what Moshe tells them. So here is what one of my favourite pieces of Torah of all time. I'll read this to you as well. Nikmas b'nei Yisrael, God said to Moshe, go and fight a war of revenge on behalf of the Jewish people. And Moshe said to the Jewish people, go and fight a war, we're going to go and fight a war, Nikmas Hashem, of revenge for the sake of Hashem. He changed it. Moshe HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Moshe said to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Rabban Shalom Almighty, Ila Hayina Arelim of the Avodah Zarah. So God says to Moshe, why did you change it? Right? It was supposed to be a war of revenge for what they did to you, not me. And Moshe says, Rabban Shalom Almighty, Ila Hayina Arelim, if we were uncircumcised, or of the Avodah Zarah, or we worshipped idols like everybody else does, because each nation had, of course, the god, the chief god, and the Vikings had Odin, was it, and the Greeks had Zeus, and the Romans had Jupiter, and all that sort of stuff. If we just did ours, George, Fred, and Henry, or Jaime, Shmuel, and whatever, and these were our gods, they wouldn't hate us at all. We would just be another people like the Irish, or the Italians, or the Chinese, or whatever you like. But why do they hate us so much? Because of the Torah and the mitzvahs that he gave to us. And the Kama Shachol. So it's really a war against you. So what they did was a war against you. You're fighting against the Jews is because the Jews have taken up this offer from God to be the chosen people and to carry his message all the way through the centuries. Therefore, this is the Kamas Hashem b'Midian, Shahom et Keneged Yisrael, Ki'ila Am et Keneged HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's a war against you. If you're fighting against the Jewish people, ultimately you're trying to fight against God. That's a very interesting idea. Yeah? Ultimately, you're trying to fight against God. He would not have been the first one. They would not be the first one to want to fight against God. Who was the first opponent of God? Sounds a very, very strange thing. This, if we go back, and this, I'll throw a bit of Kabbalah in here, which I think you'll enjoy. This is Adam and Eve. Adam and Eve, right? And Adam and Eve, right? They live in the Garden of Eden, which we've been discussing. But whatever that really means. And then they have two sons. One's called Cain. One's called Hebel. Fine. And you remember they have a bit of a falling out after Cain comes up with the idea of bringing a sacrifice to God. Hebel thinks, ooh, that's a good idea. And he does as well. But Cain brings a very sort of like second-class stuff. Yeah, what don't I need? Right? Whereas Hebel, he says, wow, I've got some of the best stuff. God accepts Hebel's sacrifice and does not accept Cain's. And Cain is, I think the correct Hebrew translation, miffed. Right. Super miffed. Okay? So listen to what happens here. This is astonishing. So what comes next, and you know this bit, when they're out into the field, he turns around and he says to him, and doesn't say what he says to him. Full stop. And he rises up against his brother Hebel and he kills him. But the Targum here, the translator, of course, in Medrash, says an astonishing thing. He says, they argue about what they, why they brought what they brought, etc. But Oma Hebel, and he says to Hebel, Cain says to Abel, Leistin, there is no laws, but Leis Dain, there is no judge, God, but Leis Dain, but Leis Alma Achron, there's no Olam Haba, there's no world to come, but Leis Mitan Agar Tab Tzadikim, but Leis Mifra Min Harishoim. He doesn't reward good people, he doesn't punish bad people. Only have about Omer the Cain Eistin, and he says, no, there is God, and there is judgment, and there is God's control of events in the world, and that's what they argue about, and he kills them. Now this is astonishing, because just before that, God has said to him, when he sees that he's all upset because Hashem didn't accept his gift, he said, look, you can go over this. Just don't lose your temper. Temper's a terrible thing. And you can go over this. You made a mistake. Just work on yourself and you'll be fine. But he doesn't work on himself. But hold on. God just spoke to him. What's the name we give to people who God speaks to? Leaving aside schizophrenic. Sorry? Prophets. He's a prophet. Hashem just spoke to him. And sadly, there is no God. Because if you want something to be, you won't look at the evidence that it's not. As we mentioned before, this horrible little Swedish, what's her name? Greta Thunberg, or what she's called, refused to look at the videos taken by Hamas of the slaughter of the... No, I'm not looking. If you don't want to look, you're not going to look. So I think the first person who, as it were, had a fight with God was Cain. Now he regrets it and all that sort of stuff. But that's the first example of a fight. Right? Next bit gets very interesting. What comes next? So there are 10 generations, as you recall, from Adam to Noah. Right? And then there are 10 generations from Noah to Avram. And it says in Pirkei Avot, all those generations were incredibly corrupt and horrible. And so, what's the point of that then? It's to tell you how long-suffering and how patient God is, hoping that they would sort themselves out. And when they didn't, then he intervenes. So Noah, obviously the intervention after 10 generations was the flood. And then what happens after the next 10 generation block? Then along comes Avram Avinu. Right? But there's somebody who is the nemesis of Avram Avinu. Who's that? Who's Avram Avinu's nemesis? A guy called Nimrod. Right? So Nimrod, it says that this, Vayhi kol ha'oretz sofa echos v'devorim achodim. The whole world spoke one language. Did you know that? Originally it was only one language. And devorim achodim, and we're speaking about achodim, ones. That's the literal translation, that's the right translation, but of course at the moment it doesn't make any sense. So, yeah, I'll do it again, it's weird. Vayhi, it was, kol ha'oretz sofa echos. So the whole world spoke one language. Do you know the language? Hebrew. Udevorim achodim, and we're speaking about achodim, two ones. Right? So imagine the two number ones. Imagine we're having a conversation because the let's say the there's an election, and Netanyahu's coalition gets back in with a 1% majority. And there's 1% inflation. So we'll be talking about two ones. Right? So what were the ones that we're talking about? And then, but let's see, you know what happens next. So then they move, now this is astonishing, and this will fit very nicely to that strange Haggadah about Tohu Vavohu. Then they move to the west. Okay? Vayimsa Bika, and they find a valley. Okay? So let me just...
Who are they?
The humanity at the time. So they move, I'll draw this on the whiteboard here. So here's a mountain, and of course you've got a mountain, you've got a valley, etc., etc. So they move to the west over here, so that means they must have been in the east, or probably in the east, and they were. And then they move, and they find this valley. What do they do there? They build a city there. Right? Very small city, just one house. But they build a city there, and then what else? So Vayimsa Bika Ba'aretz Shinar B'Yeshashon. And there's a place called Shinar, if you want the name of the place. V'yama Isha or Ehu, so they all turned around and said, united, Hova Nilman Levinim, let's get some bricks, make bricks. We need to fill it Srefa, and we'll burn, bake them in a kiln. So we'll be able to make structures. So let's make a city. Umigdal. And the city has to have a migdal, a tower. Right, so here's a tower in the city as well. Okay? It's almost starting to look like a city. Anyway, and the interesting thing is, migdal rosh b'shmaim, that its head will be in the heavens. Asalon Hashem, and we will make for ourselves a name. Penofut al pni colors, lest we are scattered throughout the whole of the world. Right? Bit strange, but you got the general idea?
Yeah.
Okay. V'yered Hashem lirois es ha'ir. So God comes down to have a look at this structure that they're making. In actual fact, Avram Avinu saw it and davened Hashem to come down and have a look. I mean, Hashem, you anyway. Asher bona b'nei Adam. But listen to this, because this is good to knock your socks off. V'yom Hashem hein am echad. They are one people. V'sofa echas, with one language. L'kulim, for all of them. V'zeh hachilim la'asais. And this is what they started to do. V'ata lo yibotza mehem kol asher yizam la'asais. Now, as a result of this, nothing will be able to withstand them. Whatever they want to do, they'll be able to do. Now, what was these two ones they were talking about? They were talking about the fact that Avram Avinu is, of course, challenging all this stuff. The world, just 10 generations ago, there was tons of prophets about stuff that they knew about God. And Avram is sort of like re-establishing that old belief which had fallen into obscurity. Right? And that's obviously a threat to the king. And you know, of course, he stuck him in Avram in jail for 10 years, in the dungeon.
I remember the furnace.
No, that was after the furnace.
After the
10 years. And the furnace, the time. One of my chavrusas and I, once we finished learning a tractate, it was Megillah, I think. And we decided we were going to celebrate, we're going to go and have an afternoon out, and we went to a castle called Lancaster Castle, which is about an hour and a bit north of Manchester, in the northwest of England. The word caster, in English, and probably in other languages as well, because it's a Latin word and it means castle. So if you find this a town called with Chester or Castor at the end of it, it was a Roman town. Right? So if you live in mainland Europe, you'll find lots of them, and in England as well, not Scotland, because when the Romans tried to get into Scotland, they gave them a bloody nose. But anyway, so that's the idea. There was a castle there, and it was expanded by Queen Elizabeth I. It is still today a jail, big castle, and it's also a courthouse. So in the day we were visiting, we went on the tour, and the lady doing the tour explained how it became. Why did Elizabeth I make it into a big castle? Because the Scots kept coming across the border and burning the town to the ground, so people would flee in and be protected from it there. And then she went around asking everybody, all the tourists, where are you from? Japan, Italy, Germany, all this sort of stuff, and they came to Scotland. Just Scotland. Could you try and leave the castle the way it was when you found it when you leave? But it's very, very interesting. We went down to a place, they just knocked down a wall in the bowels of this castle for some reason, and behind it they found a row of cells. Right, and the cells, there were three in each, it was just three. And the door was oak and it was that thick. With big sort of nails stuck in it. And the door was open and there was a light, very bright light there. The walls painted white. and people were stuffed into this. So she said, does anybody want to go to be locked in? And I said, me. Because I wanted to experience what it must have been like for Avram Avinu to be in that place for 10 years. When they closed the door, it was pitch dark. And you're talking about wood that thick, you couldn't hear a thing. Of course, she was going to let me out in a minute or so. But anyway, I wanted to get that feeling. Because Avram Avinu was in something like that. It's not, the jails they have these days, with jacuzzis and TV sets and stuff like that. This was a dungeon, with rats and stuff like that. Oh, the length of it was literally from that wall there to here. And the width was literally from the table here to here. So the span of my arms. And that's where he was. And he slept on the floor. And Avram Avinu at any time could have come out and get himself out. If only he would admit that the guy, Nimrod, who thinks he's a god, is a god, even if he doesn't believe it. After 10 years, they bring him out in front of the king. Avram is skin and bone. Kings, I'm sure, had lots of cholent, or whatever they have in those days. He's put on a bit of weight. So, oh yes, you're the Jew boy who said that I'm not a god. What do you say now, Jew boy? He said, no, you're still not a god. Right? I said, okay, you'll see the power of the gods. One of the gods is fire. 3 days from now, you're going to be taken and burned alive at Ur-Kasdim. And for 3 days he was on the stocks. You've seen medieval things. It's sort of like.
Where does it say all this?
Sorry? Oh, this is in Medrash. The big hole for the head and the hands and stuff like that. And people could, slap him and spit on him and stuff like that. His mother, called Amasle Bas Carnival, she said, just say you think he's a god, just save your life. No, wouldn't do it. And of course he gets thrown into the furnace. And God does exist, so he's not harmed. But I wanted to see, imagine being in that little dungeon for a day. Now imagine a week. You would go mad, no? And now imagine a month. A year? 10 years? They didn't have electric lights then. Astonishing stuff. And the person said they didn't have to worry about them trying to escape, because when they opened the door, which is once a day to take out the garbage and give it food, the light, they were blinded. So they just closed it. You couldn't, look at it, the blind as a bat. Okay, so basically, here we've got this guy called Avram, and he's challenging him, but they're talking about two things. The fact that there is ultimately one God, that's one of the ones that we're talking about, and the other thing that we're talking about is Avram and his wife. They're just one, because they can't have any kids. They knew Avram couldn't have any kids. They had all sorts of occult powers, and we know that Avram himself, when God says, you're going to have a child, it's impossible. I've looked into this using my powers of astrology, and I can see that I'm not going to have a child. Well, if your wife doesn't have a womb, and he incidentally had a gynecological issue as well, and he was born what's called a tum-tum, then it's just an impossibility. And God says, forget about astrology. Jews are not affected by Nazism, which is what astrology is. Okay, so he's a threat. Yes, he's a threat, but he's a what's that? What's the call in cards as a phrase? A busted flush. Have you heard that? It's when you've got somebody shows maybe he's bluffing, and he looks as though he's got a stronger hand. I think this is how it works. I don't know much about cards. And then you call his bluff, and he's got to. And in actual fact, he was bluffing. He was trying to intimidate you out of the game. So he's a busted flush. He can't have any children. Well, of course, he did have children. Right? But here is an astonishing thing. They are going to be, they want to fight against God, and God says if they are able to do it, once they've completed this, they'll be able to do it. So I have to intervene to stop them getting to the completion point. And what is this now? If you remember what I said before, they find the valley Okay, they want to build in a valley. It's in the west, not the east. They build a city, and they've got a tower. Does that ring a bell? Well, not the valley. It's an anti-Jerusalem. It's an anti-Jerusalem. We are in the east. Our temple's on the top of a mountain. Right? You can visit it. We've got Migdal David, the Tower of God. They were able to plan, understand, and see exactly what the Jewish people, the two ones we were talking about, are meant to be, and construct an alternative model which could take the world back to Tahu Vav. The world can exist without Jews, but it would be a truly hellish place. There was I think it was a book, and then I think they made it into a TV series. It's a funny name. It's called back to castles. The Man in the Iron or High Castle. I can't remember.
Oh, yeah.
Did you hear this? And it posits what would happen if the Germans and the Japanese had won the Second World War. So the Germans take, the east coast of America. The Japanese take the west coast, and eventually, apparently, they're going to go to war against each other as well. But the Germans are way ahead. But it imagines that they'd won, and what the world would be like if the Nazis would have won. Pretty much the way that the world is going at the moment, because that is indeed the ambition. And if you think what the Hamas Iranians want to do, they've actually got an edge in the Nazis. Right? The Nazis at least tried to hide what they were trying to do. Right? And the Nazis often operated under a code name in the Holocaust called Nacht und Nebel. Did I pronounce that correctly? Nacht und Nebel. Nebel. Nacht und Nebel. So night and fog. You weren't seeing what they're up to. Well, they wanted to hide it, so they could lead the Jews, as it were, like lambs to the slaughter. But Hamas and the Iranians are exactly telling you what they want to do. So the world's explosion of anti-Semitism in 1945 is totally paralleled by what's going on today. Right.
So for Hamas and Iran, the kind of awareness of who they are is part of their armory.
What?
The Germans had a serious army, which was the central thing which they were going to use to conquer the world with.
Right. And nearly did.
Whereas Hamas and Iran, they need the terror, if you like.
That's a very, very interesting point. Yes. Yeah, they can't fight. None of them are strong enough to fight in a conventional. Well, they tried.
I don't think Iran ever intended to fight.
Yes, perhaps.
I think
they wanted to inflict death on Israel by 1,000 cuts, 1,000 small cuts, not take to the field against the Israeli army. That would have been.
That's the only way they could do it.
Yeah. So, here's one of my books. I'm not trying to sell you this because it's out of print. This is the only one I've got left. It's called
Is it signed?
Sorry?
What's that?
No! Okay. It's called On the Derech. Anybody watching this, you can get it second hand or something. And it's called Answers to Questions That Challenge Jewish Minds. Answers to Questions That Challenge Jewish Minds. And the interesting thing is that almost every single one of these questions were asked, or these essays were based on a question that was asked to me by one of my students. It doesn't mean to say young, like that guy who was videoing me before. He's one of my university students. But students like yourself, older people, who, good brains, and they ask a question and you've just never heard the question. As I think I once told you, the most exciting sentence I know in any language is, I don't know. I get so excited by I don't know, because that means, let's go and find out. And it's a challenge. Anyway, so basically, this essay here, number 2 in the book, is called What is a Jew Meant to Think When Confronted with the Holocaust? Now that's going to be very, very pertinent, because I keep referring in my writings to the mini-Holocaust of October the 7th. And indeed it was exactly that. There's been a pogrom, their ambition is the exact same as the Nazis, to destroy the Jewish people, and then they would replace them. And it's interesting point to be made here that the Christian world and the Muslim world are very, very much similar in this regard. They consider themselves to be the new Jews. So if the church called itself the New Israel. If you ever go, Paris, I used to live in Paris, if you ever go into one of Paris's two cathedrals, one's called Notre Dame, which was burned down by Muslims, as we all know, although we try to keep that one quiet, and it's nearly finished, I think, and the other one's called Sacré-Cœur, Sacred Heart. And if you ever go in as a tourist, or you see pictures, you can see it online probably, of the inside of the cathedral called Sacré-Cœur, you'll see, a cathedral it comes from the Latin word cathedra, meaning chair, because that's where the bishop sits. That's the Bishop of Paris sits. He sits in the chair, and his chair is beautifully wood-carved Star of David behind him. Because the church saw itself as the new Israel. Go back to the other cathedral. If you go back to in Notre Dame, you've got three archways, the big archway in the middle, and then one on either side. Above the archway on the left is a statue of a young woman, and she is blindfolded. It might be the other way around, I can't remember these days. And she's holding a staff, a walking staff, which is snapped in two, and her head is down. And the other side, and this is a very, very common feature of church architecture all the way through the Middle Ages, is the same woman really, only her head's held high, her staff is not broken, and she's triumphant. This is called church and synagogue, Iglesia Synagoga. And that was very, very common across Europe. Right? This was the triumph of the church over the synagogue. They are the new Israel. Their Bible is called the New Testament. Right? And they see themselves, the church sees itself as being, this is it. This is the fruition of what the first giving was all about. Of course, the Ramban had a famous debate with something called Pablo Cristiani. And with a name like Paul Christian, you can probably guess he was a Jew who had converted to Christianity, which lasted for a day, and you can watch it or listen to it online. It's very, very. Not only did he defeat the entire church in debate, but he did it with humour. He had chutzpah, which is very good. Anyway, so you can see.
Afterwards, he moved.
Yeah, the king, and it wasn't Spain actually. Did I say Spain? It wasn't. It was held in Barcelona, and Barcelona was not a Spanish city because there was no Spain in those days. Right? It was all little kingdoms. I come from the United Kingdom. That's Wales, England, Northern Ireland. Used to be Ireland, the whole of Ireland, and Scotland. So 4 kingdoms came together to make a country. Spain, same thing. In 1492. Then, thanks to the good efforts of somebody we mentioned just recently, a rabbi called Senor, he was the guy in charge of the finance, along with the Abarbanel of the kings of Spain. And he made a shidduch between the houses of Aragon and Castile, if I remember rightly, and that was their Catholic Majesties Ferdinand and Isabella, and they expressed their gratitude by throwing the Jews out. But they saw themselves as being the new Jews. The Muslims see themselves also in the exact same role. There was Judaism. This is the famous God is fickle theory. Judaism, that's right. Then God changes his mind. No, pork's okay now, and you don't have to keep Shabbos anymore, and etc., etc. And then gave Christianity. And then God's fickle again, that's John, and it's pork's out again, and you do have to keep Shabbos, only Friday night for the Muslims, etc., etc. So, but Islam sees itself as being the new Judaism. So, there's always been people who see themselves as being the new Jews, and either openly as a negative Jew. You've got to have that pattern. The world's created with that pattern, but you can fit into it negatively or positively. So we'll make an anti-Jerusalem, and it'll have a wall, and it'll be in a valley, not on a mountain, and it'll have a tower, etc.
But there were no Jews then yet.
Yeah, Abram was. First of all, they saw. What did they saw? What were they speaking about? They could see into the future. When Abram was about to be born.
Reality.
Yeah, and future realities. When Abram was born, about to be born, Nimrod's. You just say magicians, but it's far more sophisticated than that, could see the possibility of that birth and somebody who would challenge him.
Yeah.
And that's why they had all the boys killed at birth.
Who did that?
Nimrod.
Oh, did he?
And that's why Avram was hidden in a cave
Okay.
for 4 years. Or
Oh, you mean
other
when he was a
opinions.
kid?
When he was a kid. Okay. So this essay here is called What is a Jew Meant to Think When Confronted with the Holocaust? So, some people, I've heard from Jews sort of like not being sort of like outraged at the suggestion that you should question it. Well, somebody called Rav Shach, who was the leader of the yeshiva world, and lived here in Eretz Yisrael, he writes the following. I want to put to you a question which has been in my mind for many years. Oh, he was an escapee from the Holocaust. Several decades ago was the Holocaust, in which 6 million Jews were killed. Now, the world wasn't peaceful before then either. Since the First World War, there's been no peace anywhere. Is it not surprising when we ask why this happened? Is it not surprising that we ask why does this happen? It's a good question. Why did God let the Holocaust happen? It's a good question. And it's a reasonable question. You're not in any way failing as a Jew or as a faithful Jew or Jewess by asking that question. Because Rashach, who from the yeshiva world was the leader of the generation, I was troubled by that. The greatest of the Jews, like Moshe, was troubled by why bad things happen to good people. Since the First World War, there's been no peace anywhere. Is it not surprising then that we ask why it happened? Does Hashem Chas v'Shalom treat us with cruelty? No, we don't think so. Surely He's merciful and compassionate King, which is what we think. So therefore, it's not strange that He did such a thing to us. Did He do it for no reason? Was a human being, a barbarian like Hitler, Yamashal, really strong enough to destroy 6 million people? 6 million Jews? If this is what we think, then our faith in the way the Creator of the world looks after humanity is deficient. I ask you, what is a Jew meant to think when confronted with the horrifying facts of the Holocaust, the likes of which has not struck our people for hundreds of years? And I think if we could rewrite that and say, just nearly 2 years ago, what is a Jew meant to say confronted with the reality of the October 7th attacks and the tsunami of Jew hatred all over the world today? It's something which we have to ask about. Okay. One of my favourite books was written, it's called The Reunion, and it was written by a fellow who was a German Jew. It's semi-autobiographical. He was very assimilated family, and his father was a doctor. In the book, the father, who fought with tremendous passion for Germany in the First World War, he and his wife commit suicide, not because they knew what was going to happen to them. It's just that Germany had rejected them. For so many Jews to die for unser Heimat, for our homeland, that was the greatest. That was our homeland. Berlin is our Jerusalem, an alternative Jerusalem. Berlin is our Jerusalem. Anyway, so basically, in the book, it's a semi-autobiographical. It's a very, very little book. I was given this to review this for school, and I wanted to use it for teaching. It talks about how he goes to this exclusive school, and the premise is he becomes best friends with somebody who's comes from an elite German family of one something or other.
When is this?
Oh, this is 1930s, right? In fact, at the end of the book, it says two friends become soulmates. A year later, the friendship is over because this is Germany and the year is 1933. So that's enough. We all know what's coming next, right? And in it, he says the following thing. He and his friend, so they're like 14, 15, so young men, being philosophical and asking all sorts of questions. I'll read a little bit to you. In the book, the Jewish boy through whom the tale is told reports an incident when his neighbour's wooden house went up in flames. The 3 children who were inside were burned to death. He writes, "It shook me as nothing had shaken me before. I dread of 1 million people drowned by the Yellow River in China, of 2 million drowned by the Yangtze, also in China. I knew that 1 million soldiers died at Verdun. But these children I knew. I'd seen them with my own eyes. This was altogether different. What had they done? What had the poor mother and father done to deserve this? It seemed to me there was just 2 alternatives. Either no God existed, or there did exist a deity who was monstrous if powerful, and futile if powerless. That means if God was powerful enough to have stopped this, and didn't, He's a monster. And if he's not powerful enough to stop this, what's the point in having him? Okay? Once and for all, I jettisoned all belief in a benevolent mastermind. Okay? Now this is tragic, because the author of this book was a clever fellow. He survived. His parents sent him to America. And here is a man who lived into his 80s, I think, boldly declaring that his mind never superseded the abilities of his 14-year-old self. Now in the story, he goes and discusses it with his friend, called Conradin, and he goes and discusses it with his pastor in his church. And he comes back with an answer which is frankly a very bad answer, and that was that he's done. But at least, faced with the theological question, the non-Jewish friend goes and asks the theologian. It might have been he wasn't a very good theologian, he didn't have a good answer, but the logical place to take a sore thumb is to a doctor. Right? Don't take it to a dentist, and certainly don't ignore it altogether. But he did. That was it. If my 14-year-old mind can't figure out, what this is all about, then I'm done. Okay. So basically, at the end of the Torah, in Devorim, the Pasuk says the following thing. Hashem says to Moshe, when you go to lie with your fathers, this people will rise up and lust after the alien gods of the land into which they are coming. Which, if you know anything about Jewish history, of course is what happened. And they will abandon me and break my covenant, which I made with them. And my anger will burn against them on that day, and I will abandon them and hide my face from them, and they will be their enemies' prey. So it seems to be that Pasuk is telling the contract between the Jewish people and Hashem. If you want me to protect you, I'm there for you. No problem. I'm your father, you're my kids. But if you tell me to get lost, I'll get lost. But then don't turn around and blame me for not being there when you needed me most, because you believed in socialism or you believed in fascism. And don't forget, incidentally, lots of Jewish fascists. Before Hitler came on the scene, there was a guy called Mussolini. The chief rabbi of Rome was in the fascist council. There was Jewish branch church in the Milan ghetto. So if you tell me to get lost, and the new ism that you put all your faith in turns on you, well, don't complain to me. I'm not there. Didn't you tell me to get lost? Mm. So that's the relationship which we have. Hashem says to Moshe, they're going to do this, and my anger will be, I'm going to kill them all. Don't say that. It's just that I'll abandon them. If you want me to, you don't need me anymore. Fine. Then don't complain. Sometimes you see.
But then the Hasidic communities, they just got swept up with it.
Oh, so you're raising a very, very interesting point. I think we've talked about this point before in our sharing. When God is angry with the Jewish people, who's he angry with? The non-religious Jews or the religious Jews? The answer is the religious Jews.
Yeah.
The non-religious Jews, go up to Tel Aviv or Haifa, the non-religious Jews who know nothing, literally know nothing, about their Jewish identity, certainly about Judaism, and they're eating pork or doing whatever they're doing, that's because they know nothing. It's like a child who simply, finds something disgusting in the floor, mouldy old bread, sticks it in his mouth. He doesn't know it's bad for him. But the ones who know better, that's us. So, yeah. So the Hasidim who were swept up in it, but ultimately it was the Hasidim and other religious Jews, whatever we did wrong, we'll get to that in a second, then basically and incidentally, it wasn't just one thing, and it wasn't just over 1 year. It could be 100 years. The calculation in Shemaim could be 300 years. And remember again, as I was going on to say, you sometimes, and you see this after Chernobyl blew up, people sometimes need a big shock for them to change. I'll tell you something which I used to say to my university students, and I'm going to tell you this as well. I'll have enough time. We're going to have to pick this up next week, I think. And that is, suppose I said to you, you're going to be very offended by this. Really, God should have killed 12 million Jews. But he let us off. And he killed only 6. Now, of course, you'd be upset by that. And you would be offended by that, I hope. However, after the Second World War, there was a motto which became very popular with the Jews, which was never again. And they said other things like, we're not going to award Hitler a posthumous victory. And then Zionism reached its zenith with the founding of the State of Israel. People knew that you couldn't depend on anybody else to look after you. We had to do it for ourselves. Fine. So that was certainly the popular opinion after the Second World War. By the 1960s, what was the intermarriage rate in America?
Very high.
Yeah, 50%. Already in the 60s, 50%. Now, people talk about, when you marry out and your kids aren't Jewish, or you don't bring them up Jewish. If it's a Jewish woman, she can always say, and often I've heard Jewish women say that, but my kids will be Jewish. Yeah, but how Jewish are they going to be? After all, if I'm eating a pork sandwich, you're going to tell me not to? You're married to Christopher. It's a nonsense. Today, I think the figures in the 70s and maybe in some places 80s. It's a complete and total disaster. So, sometimes you need something really shocking to stop a person doing, like Chernobyl when it blew up. Then people took, nuclear power stations and the threat that they pose seriously. But I need Chernobyl to blow up before that happened. Suppose the Jewish people are heading for disaster anyway because of the direction that we have set for ourselves. And suppose God had allowed a pogrom to happen, in which 100 people in the Polish village of Splodge, I just made that up. But you never know with Poland because of funny names. They've got a lot of odges in them. So Splodge, 100 Jews were killed. Right? Would that evoke the reaction of never again? We can't trust anybody else? No. Sometimes it has to be something which is absolutely enormous. So suppose God tells us, I should have been 12, but I'll let you off. And how long was that idea of doing our bit to repair the Jewish people and put the Jewish people back together after the Second World War? 1945 to the mid-60s. Oh, you managed 20 years, didn't you?
By the way, I just had a thought. There's a whole spectrum of what could have happened since the disengagement of Gaza. If Sharon had not had a stroke and he'd gone in after the first 5 rockets,
right,
then that would have been the cost of the neutralising up.
Look,
and if Hezbollah joined the same morning as Hamas, that would have been by lots of counts the end of Israel.
Don't forget.
So what happened was somewhere like on the spectrum.
Yes, but don't forget, as we say in davening every morning when we read the Shira, Hashem Ish Mocham Hashem Shema. Ultimately, who wins wars and how they win wars, it's all up to God. Now, if you want God to be on your side, there are certain expectations He has of you.
Sure.
And we'll be discussing where we got that wrong next week and how we could put it right. And how we can put it right.
Okay.
Because we are in a second tsunami of Jew hatred.